Now, next member that you have over here is your dedicated hosts. So once it comes to a lot of compliance requirements, what organizations would want is they don't want a multi-tenant kind of setup, which means what Microsoft is providing or what other vendors are providing is for number of organizations with their respective domain, they can create their virtual machines, but those virtual machines will be virtual machines for two organizations, could be on the same physical server, physical rack server. What organizations are saying is we don't want even that physical rack server to be shared across number of organizations. Okay, so my workload should be hosted onto a separate rack server altogether, or a separate set of physical environment altogether. Microsoft promises that, or Microsoft helps us achieve that by using something called as Azure VM dedicated hosts. Okay, so we can have an option over here of using a dedicated host, which will help you answer a lot of questions and queries that your audit team has, right? Your compliance team has. So those questions can be answered by using dedicated hosts.
Is there any security concerns here? The reason for this dedicated host?
There's no security concern. It's from what I know. Most of the organizations, it is more from an audit perspective or compliance perspective.
Okay. In fact, they're more secured. They're more secured because they're not sharing their with anybody else.
See, Chidna, as far as any access to the physical machines, anyways, is not there, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, from my knowledge, I don't see why people would want that. From my understanding is, it's more towards if there are more machines created by that organization, it may consume more space from that rack server environment. And I know that from my from scalability perspective, right, I would need many more such machines. So if it goes beyond two or three rack servers, the speed might go down. So from what I understand is this is more to do with security, more to do with compliance and audit rather than security. Because any code that you write will not allow you access the physical machines. It will be only within the virtual environment. So it's more to do with ownership and compliance. Right? Now, this is something which was not part of Microsoft technology, Microsoft architecture earlier. This came much later when IBM started giving this as a service. I'm not sure how many of you are aware about this. As part of IBM Cloud, this is one of the facilities which IBM gives, where you can put your rack server within the IBM environment. And a lot of organizations have done that earlier. So instead of having IBM servers within their environment, they would put their rack servers within IBM environment. And IBM team allows them to access it from outside. So same set of facility is available on Azure as well using dedicated hosts. So if you look at dedicated host, how this works is this is giving you hardware isolation. So what Microsoft is doing is by using something called as host group. So within host group, they will create a availability zone, fault domain, and all those resources within the environment, right? Along with and make it highly available. When you are creating your machine, you'll have to specify your machine on the dedicated host, right? So as far as this host group is concerned, this is on Microsoft side. We'll have to create dedicated host, and when you are creating your machines, virtual machines, you put your machines within dedicated host, right? I'm not sure if you all will be aware about this. When we started working on Azure, somewhere in around 2010, if I'm not mistaken, 2010, 2011, we had this concept of availability groups. Now these availability groups are coming back by using a host group. This is something which was much earlier when IS 1.0 was just starting. So that availability group Microsoft is promoting back by using a host group, where we are saying that I want to create other set of machines on the same rack server or in the same environment. So if you look at the high availability considerations, now though this environment that we're talking about, dedicated host, is in the Microsoft Data Center, we can still avail the facility of availability zone. So how will I do that? So one machine will be in one host group or one environment, and second machine will be in second host group. But this host group is scattered across buildings, across the 3 buildings that we mentioned in our yesterday's conversation. We can assign fault domain to each group to make sure there are more than one rack servers which get where our machines are created, and there are more than one rack servers which are being allocated for you on Microsoft environment, right? So using host group does not mean that your resource is not highly available. Microsoft will provide more. So like I said earlier, Microsoft will give you a dedicated rack servers. So when you are going for this, you should have you should plan for minimum like 100 odd VMs. In that scenario, this will make sense for you. Okay, so having 100 odd VMs and having high configuration of those machines, right? Looking at high scalability, DR solutions for your applications. So all those things you can take care of when you're going for dedicated host. So dedicated host gives you a dedicated environment plus high availability. While you are creating these resources, you can specify how many CPUs you want, how many dedicated hosts you want per region, how many CPUs you want to specify per region, right? Because now you are owning that underlying physical environment. So you'll have to specify the quota for this, right? So more you get into the physical environment, you'll have more roles and responsibilities for you and your team in terms of managing that environment. So if in case you are falling short on quota, you can generate a request to Microsoft, raise a ticket with them, and ask for a quota increase. If you look at the limitations over here, so you have options of availability zone, you have options of availability set, but you don't have options of virtual machine scale sets. Correct? The reason being, the core purpose of virtual machine scale set is uniformity, right? So uniform VM size, uniform VM size, VM type, VM images. Now this may not be possible once you're going to dedicated host. So when you are creating your dedicated host, one of the best ways to do is first create a host group and then associate the host group when you are creating a virtual machine, right? That's the easiest way of how you can create a dedicated host. Let me show you one of the options over here. Let's go to so here you see you have options of hosts and host groups. Let's create a host group over here. Let me take up a new resource group over here. Give it name as dedicated hosts RG. Host group name. Location Southeast Asia. Availability zone. What is the fault domain count that you would want? Let's go ahead, click on review and create. I've got the host group created. Let's add a host over here. Okay. So here, if you're looking, this is where we are adding the dedicated host. So I already have the host group over here. What type of machines you're going to create? Can you see this? So when you're creating your machine, you'll have to choose a specific family over here. What family of machines you're going to create? Let me choose. Eight virtual CPUs are required. I don't think as part of my MCD subscription, I have number of CPUs which will support this. But I'm not sure why is it giving an error, because anyways 10 CPUs per region I should be able to create. And I don't have any more virtual machines here. It's empty. We can increase, we can request for increase. Says 20 CPUs and dedicated vCPUs. Okay, I don't have dedicated vCPUs. That is why it is giving an error. So I have to raise a request with Microsoft for dedicated vCPUs. And if you see the family being supported, DV2 family, I don't have support for DCS V2. So what we can do is we need to increase the number of CPUs being allocated. And if you have a pay-as-you-go model subscription, you can raise a request with Microsoft and get this done. Due to limitations in terms of my environment, I can't do this over here, dedicated host. But I hope you are clear with this, how to create these resources. Let's proceed further. Now, once it comes to virtual machines, as part of your virtual machine creation, if you go to the advanced section, here what you can do is you can specify what is your host group. So once you have mentioned your host group, then you have mentioned your proximity placement groups. This is where you can specify your dedicated host. Okay, so once you have your host group created, you can select your host group from here. So depending upon what type of hosts you have planned to create, you'll be able to create your resources from here. Clear, everyone? So this was a quick look in terms of what is the significance of dedicated host. I could not show you an example of this because of the constraints which I have on my MCT subscription. Let's move on to the next section over here, which is configuration of disk encryption. So as far as disk encryption is concerned, this is more in terms of security. How do you secure your contents? How do you secure your resources that we are saving within the disk that we have created? As part of your security options or security resources, Microsoft by default secures all these elements, right? Microsoft secures all these resources, whether the data is in transit, whether the data is in rest. In both scenarios, Microsoft provides you the needed protection. Now, what if you want your own keys over here? Instead of Azure provided keys, what if I want my custom keys? So for custom keys, what we can do is we can create a key vault, and within that key vault, we can specify our own keys over there, right? So using that encryption keys, what we can do is we can encrypt our data, right? Whether it is for storage service or is it for disk encryption, in both these cases, we can do that. For Azure disk encryption, we can also make use of a BitLocker, right? You can use something like HSM, hardware security modules for Windows environment. For Linux environment, you can use dmcrypt. I have not used dmcrypt because I'm not from a Linux background, but I have used BitLocker. I have used Azure Key Vault to provide encryption of Windows VMs. So if you look at your disk encryption, storage service encryption is already there. Whether you choose it or not, it's up to you. Once it comes to Azure disk encryption, you will have to create something called as disk encryption set. Apply that disk encryption set onto your disks. Whether you want to apply it for OS disk and data disk both, or one of them or both of them, that's your choice. It's not a compulsion. If you look at the options available here, once it comes to key vault, like I said, you have to first create your key vault. Within your key vault, you have to specify the key. And one of the attributes that you see over here is enable access to Azure disk encryption. So here what we'll do is, before we end this module, we'll take a quick look in terms of how do you, like I said earlier, how do you create a machine? How do you create an image out of it? And once we have the image created, we'll be able to use those images in context of load balancing and in context of other high availability options that we have discussed. Okay, so before I get to that area, so I'll tell you what is something that we are going to create. So what we are doing is we'll be creating a simple project over here, infrastructure project, and using this infrastructure project, these are set of actions that we are going to do. So first thing that we are supposed to do is creation of virtual network. That's the first thing that we are going to do, creation of virtual network. Inside this virtual network, we are going to create two subnets over here, web subnet, DB subnet. Within each of these subnets, we are going to create. Okay, now before we go ahead and create machines, what I would want to do is I would first want to create a VM and convert this VM into an image. Okay, so I would first want to create a VM for image, and then I will convert that into a VM image. So VM for image means in this machine, I'm going to do whatever basic installations are required. Whatever basic installations are required, all these things will happen inside this machine. So once this machine is ready, what we are going to do is we are going to convert that into a VM image. Now using this image, what we are going to do is we are going to create multiple machines inside our subnet. Inside our subnet, we are going to create number of machines. Now once we are done with this, to make sure these machines are highly available, what are we supposed to do? To make sure these machines are highly available, what are we supposed to do?
Maybe AV Jones.
That's right. Maybe you can look at availability zones, or you will look at availability set. So you can use options of high availability that we have discussed. So while we are creating this image, while we are creating these machines, what I would want to do is I would want to use this image to create that machine, so that whatever resources we have inside this machine, inside this image, they are automatically part of the machines which are getting created. Does it make sense? So this is these are the actions which I'm going to perform in the given environment. So if you look at the steps over here, are step 1, if you look at the steps over here, the first step over here would be creation of image, right? Second step over here would be using high availability options. That's the second one. And then we'll start looking at load balancing options. Okay. So let's get started with the first step. Now, as far as image creation is concerned, for creating a particular image, first thing we'll have to do is we will have to create a virtual machine. And within that virtual machine, we will need to install whatever required software that you'd want. Let me take up a new resource group over here. Let me give it name as image RG, image resource group. In terms of virtual machine name, VM for web image. Let me take region as Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia already has availability zone. So this machine I'm going to delete. Going ahead, I would not need this machine. This is only for temporary purpose. So I'm not putting it in availability options right now. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I can use many of the existing images, but right now what we are doing is we are creating our own custom image. Let me specify my username, specify password over here. Okay, we will have to connect to this machine. As far as disks is concerned, standard HDD. So here this is the encryption which you were talking about. Right now I have not used any encryption. I will show you that demo as well as we proceed further. In terms of networking, image RG VNet, I will leave all these things default. Okay, so once this process has begun, it might take a moment. Meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and create virtual network like what we discussed earlier. And here let me create a network arch. So generally how it happens in real world scenarios is for each teams that you have. So for networking team, you'll have a different network resource group, and people from networking background, you can add those, you can give permissions to those members over here. Whatever name you want to give, I have given the name as app vnet, region Southeast Asia. Let me keep the same IP range over here. As far as subnets are concerned, I would want to have two subnets over here. One is web subnet and second is DB subnet. One is web subnet, second is DB subnet. 10.1, 10.1.1.0/24. So two subnets over here, web subnet, DB subnet. I don't have any Bastion host. What is Bastion host? I'll come to that part a bit later. No DDoS protection or firewall I have created over here. So I've got the VM ready. Now let me go inside this VM and install IS server. Since I have already enabled public IP, I have added public IP and open the port for communication 3389. So once I'm logged in successfully, I can go to the roles over here, install IS role. Now most of these things which I'm showing over here, this is done by your admin team. Creation of new resources, installation of roles within your environment. All these things is done by your admin team. Many of the admin teams already have their set of images ready. So whenever there's a requirement from the dev team, what they would do is they will quickly create that resource. Done. So let's go ahead. Click on add roles and features. Within adding roles, now this can be done using PowerShell. This can be done by using your server manager. It's up to you. So here you'll see you have option of web server IS. Let's select that. So what we are doing is we are installing IS server on this machine. This might take a moment. Now, while this is happening, let me go to Azure documentation. Now, all these steps which I'm doing over here, you can see these steps. In terms of tutorials. So how do you create a virtual machine? How do you connect to that virtual machine? Which type of image you want to take? So you can do these things using PowerShell. You can do it through Azure portal. How do you create a VM image? Right. So all this information is available. How do you create a VM which is highly available? So all these tutorials are available onto your documentation as well. Let me share the URL with you all.
For the
Yep.
exam purpose, like do we need to focus more on the PowerShell and Bash commands too, or Portal is okay?
Great question. As far as exam is concerned, you will have to practice PowerShell commands as well. So what they might, in my case, when I was giving my exam, I had a separate lab section of 15 minutes of around 100 marks, where they have asked me to perform 10 steps. That is creation of a VM, creating a private IP, creating a private DNS, creating a public DNS, and I had to do all these things by using PowerShell.
Oh, okay.
There can be a lab section as well. So unless you have practiced these things, you'll not be able to do those steps in the required timelines.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So once we are done with this, let me verify if the installation is done correctly or not. Okay, so I have my IS server installed over here. Whatever other application code that you would want, you can specify all these members over here. Now, once we are done with this, we are supposed to convert this machine into an image, right? Now, for doing that, you have to first generalize this VM. Let me show you why I have to do that. So if I go to my machine and if I try converting this into an image, can you see this? There's an option of capture. If I try converting this machine into an image, it says, it's not showing here, but in one of the steps it shows, which I will come to that. It clearly mentions that if you want to convert this machine into an image, you have to first generalize that machine. If it is not generalized, you will not be able to log in into the machines which have been created by using this image. To generalize that, I need to go to Windows System 32, and here there is a folder called as sysprep, right? This will help you to generalize your image. Now here you'll have to make sure you check on this checkbox as generalize, shutdown options as shutdown. This has to be done in this exactly same way. We cannot choose any other options right now, because if you don't do generalize and shutdown, this machine, this VM will not generalize itself. And unless we have it generalized, we'll not be able to create a image out of it successfully, right? And the entire task that we have planned, that is creating two machines out of the same image, those things will go for a toss. Okay, so we'll have to make sure we check on generalize, shutdown options, shutdown. Now, when you say generalize, what are we doing? Generalize basically means we remove any user specific settings, any user profiles that you may have created. We would need to remove all those things. That is the core purpose of generalize. Now, once this process is completed, it will shut down the machine like mentioned, and it will remove all the user specific properties or user profile information from here. So once this machine is shut down, now this shutdown process has happened from internal. From the portal also, we'll do that. So it's deallocating. And so we have stopped, delocated. Let's now do a capture. So once you're doing a capture, so do you want to put it into a gallery, or do you want to capture only as a managed image? It's up to you. Let's choose the first one. Share it to a gallery as an image version. If you don't have a gallery, you can create a new gallery over here, which will be collection of number of images. Let me create a generalized image. Target image definition. IS VM image, whatever name you want. Publisher, offer, SKU, whatever specific names you want.
Hey Subhash.
Yeah.
So we are creating this image to use it to duplicate it pretty quickly if you are spending probably
Yes.
100 servers, correct?
That's right.
And why can't we use, like I know there could be a reason. There is an option for the template, download the template right?
Yes.
And when you're creating, it gives you an option after setting up everything and you can create a template. So why can't we take that template and change these names and use it? What's the difference?
That's what I said earlier. Yes, you can use that. There are a lot of pre-existing images that we have. But here what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a custom image.
Okay.
We are trying to create a custom image.
You can use, you're saying that you can use both the options, correct?
Yes, very true.
So is there any major difference, or major difference of what kind of a scenario you have to use template and what kind of a scenario you have to use image?
I didn't get that part. When you say template, when you see, I'm not talking about template here.
No. This is an image, correct? So when we have a template option also, right, to duplicate the servers, correct? Images.
Are you talking about ERM template?
Correct.
No. Don't compare this with ERM template. ERM template is a different one. Okay, let me help you clarify that. But very good question. As far as ERM template is concerned, as part of ERM template, what did you create? That's the first part. Right now, if I go to export template or if I do any of these things, what it will do is it will copy only the external properties of that VM. Anything which is inside that VM, whatever you have installed inside the VM, that details don't get captured in ERM template.
Got it. Now I got it. Yeah.
So that will be the difference.
Yeah.
So what is the machine size? What is the machine hard disk being attached? How many disks being attached? All that external properties, all of these things will work correctly with ARM template, right? If you want to use ARM template for IS installation, you'll have to write that within your ARM template. Just because the machine has certain softwares installed inside that, those softwares don't get copied in ARM template. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So let's go back to virtual machines. So here I have VM for web image, which is stopped, delocated. So what I have done is by clicking on capture, I have captured an image over here. So here you can see there is a IS web image, which I have created. Let me select everything else apart from the image, apart from app vnet, because this is where I have respective subnets being created. Rest everything else I'll delete, right? Everything else, because I don't need these resources here. I only want the image. I only want the vnet which I had created for my application. right? And this is how it will happen.
Hey,
So your
but
server team.
I have got one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So now, so you are deleting all these resources. So
Yes.
hypothetical situation, say like you made a mistake that you're not supposed to delete one of the resource and you delete it. What happens? Is there a way we can bring it back? Is there a way,
No, there is no way to bring it back. So you'll have to create that resource again. That's why there's a concept of resource locks. So if you want to make sure that you even by mistake don't delete anything, you put a lock on that resource. That this particular resource should not be deleted.
Oh, resource lock. There is a lock. Okay, got it.
Yes. So you have an option of delete lock. You have an option of read only lock. You can do that.
Got it.
Okay. So I've got my image ready. I have got my virtual network created. Now what I need to do is inside this virtual network, I want to create my machines. So if I go to this environment, I have public IP here. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. So as far as role RG is concerned, within I have created a resource group. Let me show you this since you asked that question. And I also have that resource with me. So within role RG, this is where I have put a lock. Can you see this? There's a delete lock. So even while I selected everything and said delete, it did not delete this because I have a lock over here. If I still want to delete it, first I have to remove the lock. Then I can delete this resource. Getting it? So if you want to ensure that your resources that you have created, they are very, very critical, make sure you put a lock on that. So for now, the only resource which I require is app vnet, right? And using this app vnet, we are going to create and the image that we have using both these members, we are going to create our resources. So let's proceed further. Let's add a virtual machine over here. Let me take up a new resource group, CF server RG, server resource group, web VM 01. This is the first instance which I want to create. Southeast Asia. Availability options. I can make use of availability zone or I can make use of availability set. Okay, so let me show you an example of availability set over here. While I'm selecting availability set for the first machine, I will have to create availability set because it is not already existing. Web availability set. What is the number of fault domain that you would want? What is the number of update domain that you would want? Now this will differ from region to region. Okay, let me take smaller machine. Username. Now, like I said earlier, so I may or may not use the same name. It's not a compulsion. So each machine within the availability set can have different sizes, can have different connectivity options. Now, do I need to go for an RDP port here? Not required, because whatever softwares are needed, I have already installed that in my image. But one thing which I should not forget, since this is a web application, I would need connectivity with HTTP, HTTPS. I may not need connectivity for 3389, that is RDP port, but I would still need options for web connectivity. As far as virtual network is concerned, let me select my existing. Do I need public IP for this? Do I need public IP for this? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
In
a
terms
web.
of it's a web application, and since it's a production environment, I would not want this machine to shut down. I'm skipping other things. Okay, so let me go ahead and create this machine. So I've already added the first machine in the availability set. So we should have minimum of 2 machines over here for availability set. So let me add the second machine as well. Server RG, Web VM 02, second instance, Southeast Asia, availability set. Don't create an availability set now. We already have availability set. So both these machines, both these web VMs should be in the same availability set. Okay, I can take machine of different sizes. It's absolutely fine once it comes to availability set, or for that matter, even availability zone. Okay, let me open respective ports over here. HTTP, HTTPS, standard HDD, web subnet. So if you remember, whatever discussion we had, whatever diagram we have drawn, we are implementing the same thing over here. Okay, so whatever discussion we had in the diagram, we have created the same thing over here. So using that image, we are creating the second machine, and both of them are in the availability set. Okay, let's proceed further. Click on review and create. So my first machine is ready. Second machine I have initiated. Let me go to the first machine. Now here, I already have a public IP. Let me copy this. Now since I have used the image, Still not connecting. So what could have gone wrong? We may not have used the image that we had created, because if you use that image, you'll be able to get these resources here. So in the app VNet, we have two members here. So first thing that one is to take care is, whenever you are creating your machine, you are supposed to use the appropriate resources over here, and we are supposed to use the right image. Just give me a moment. Let me show you the step over here. Server RG, Web VM 03, availability set. When you are looking at images over here, make sure you choose the right image, which I missed out in the previous case. Go to the My Images section, and here you should be able to see IS Web Image. Okay, I can make use of IS Web Image. Let's open respective ports over here. HTTP, HTTPS, standard HDD. Use the existing VNet and subnet. Right. So whatever we are doing manually over here, that is creation of machines, all these things can be automated when you go for a virtual machine scale set. So for virtual machine scale set, you can specify what type of image you want, and you can tell him how many instances you want to create for that. It will automatically create all the resources for you. Right. So that's the difference once it comes to virtual machine scale sets, availability zone, and availability sets. So Web VM 03 is getting created, and once it is ready, I should be able to show you how the image is being used and how you have got the resources created. Let me add one more machine over here. Web VM 04. So two machines which I created earlier. I missed out on image selection. I have added both of them in existing availability set. Same image, IS Web Image Gen 1. So meanwhile, machine 4 is getting created. Let me go to the previous machine, that is Web VM 03. Let me copy the public IP address from here. Can you see this? So we have not installed anything on this machine, but since it is using the image that we have created, it is able to help us with that content. Meanwhile, if you take up a machine which is not using that image, you will not get the resources for it, right? So that's what we have to be careful about. That is selecting a right kind of image. So like Chinna was asking a question that what is the difference between ERM templates and the images? Similarly, there is also a difference between the images given by Microsoft and the vendors and the images that we are creating. So custom images, you can create lesser number of VMs as compared to what you can do with standardized images, right? So I'm not sure on the number right now. I can check for that. But I'm sure on that there is a difference in terms of how many VMs you can create by using a custom image versus how many VMs you can create by using a standard images. You can create lesser number of VMs. So till now what we have done is we have got the availability set created when I was creating the first machine, and I have added both these machines inside the availability set. Same way you can do it for availability zone as well. Now when you're doing it for availability zone, you'll have to create these kind of machines and add specific machines to the availability zone. Let me go to all resources.
So if it is if we select if we use this image in the scale sets, the steps will be like taking one image and creating how many machines you want. That's all, right?
Absolutely correct. But
Okay.
still, let me show you that.
Okay.
So here, let's go to virtual machine scale set. So when you are specifying your scale set over here, say web scale set, you can specify your availability zone over here, and you can choose your image. Correct? For all the images, I can have a single username and password. I will have same image for everyone. What type of disk I want to attach to all the machines. What is the network that you would want to choose for them. In terms of scalability, here you can mention how many instances do you want for them, right? As part of scaling policy, minimum how many machines you want, maximum how many machines you want, and what is the CPU threshold that you would want for each of them, right? So by specifying these details, you're automatically creating those kind number of virtual machines. So actually now once it is done, I should be having 4 machines over here. So if you see these resources, So both these machines have the same application running on it, right? Right now I have a single page, but you all can understand if on that image, if I have the complete framework being installed or the entire application components being installed, all these things will be replicated on the VMs which I have created using the same image. Is that part clear to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's proceed further and go to the next section over here. Now, before I forget that, let me show you an option for this disk encryption. So currently, if I go to any one of these machines, any of the VMs that I have, both these VMs has a OS disk over here, right? So for this OS disk, if I want to perform encryption, so first thing is this machine has to be shut down. This machine has to be delocated. Then I can go and change the values of the disk encryption. So let me do that. Let me stop this machine. While this machine is stopping, let me create another required resource, which is a key vault. Because for encryption, I will need a key, right? Let me create a key vault. And for this, I will use another resource group, which is security RG, security resource group. Now, if you see each of these resource groups, you should map it to different teams within your environment. CF key vault 2704, region Southeast Asia. If you look at the access policy over here, do you remember while discussing about this, we said we should enable for disk volume encryption. What permissions do you want for that user? We can select those permissions. Now, if you want to use it only for a specific network, you can specify that. You want to use the key vault only within a specific network, you can do that. Or if you want to make public accessible to all networks, you can do that as well. So step one here, if you see, for disk encryption is creating a key vault. Within key vault, we'll have to create a key over here, which will help you for disk encryption. So once the key is created, so if you look at the steps for image creation, what are the steps that we have done? Can anybody help me with this? What are the steps that we have performed for image creation?
Oh,
We need to create a VM.
okay.
Inside
Yeah.
this VM, what is the next step?
Generalize.
No. Install
Okay.
web server role.
IIS setting up.
That's right. Install web server role. Third step is use sysprep. Use sysprep.
This is where
Generalize.
Generalize.
Use sysprep. Generalize. And
Shut down.
Shut down. Sysprep. Generalize. Shut down. Right? Again, from portal, also do a shutdown. If you don't shut down yourself, the process of image creation will do a shutdown for you. Next step is capture image. That's it. So this will help you get your image created. For high availability option, what are we supposed to do?
So I have got a question here. When capture image, it's automatically stored in the gallery, or should we, say that, should we create a folder in the gallery to put our images?
Okay, so there are two options. One is you want to create a gallery, or you want to create a managed image yourself. So in my case, I have not put it into the gallery. When you select a gallery, you have to specify details of the image, right? What is the details that you want, publisher information, all these things you'll have to mention and put your image in the gallery. So when you are creating a new VM, you can go to the gallery and from there you can select your image.
Got it.
Right? Or else you can go to my images and from there you can select. For high availability options, create a VM, select high availability option, select a high availability option, which will be availability set, which can be availability zone. That's up to you. So which option you want to select? And for every VM, you don't have to select availability set, only for the first one. Clear, everyone? Okay. Create availability set only for the first machine, not for all the machines. So once this is done, next is add VM, add second VM in existing availability set. Right. So this is the current high availability option which we have used. Okay. Now next thing which I'm doing over here parallelly is I'm showing you for disk encryption. So for disk encryption, what are the steps required? Step one is creation of key vault. That's one. Step two is create a key inside that. Step three will be creating disk encryption set. Third step will be creating a disk encryption set. And the fourth step over here will be do a disk apply disk encryption set. Now the question over here would be, when did I use the key which I had created? Now this key will be required over here within your disk encryption set. Within disk encryption set, there are two members over here. Within your disk encryption set, there are two members over here. One is single encryption and another is double encryption. So depending upon what is the type of encryption you want, you can specify that over here. Okay, so just give me a moment. So if I show you, this will make more sense. So I have got this Subhash key created. Let me go to disk encryption set. This should be in which resource group? This will be in security RG. So you'll see my resources are in different resource groups, but I can still collate them and apply them together on my virtual machine or other resources because all of them are in the same region, that is Southeast Asia. Now here if you see the encryption type, you have customer managed key, single encryption, double encryption. So double encryption means whatever is given by Azure, I want to use that. Plus I also want to use the customer managed key. So I want to use both of them together. Let me select the key vault. This already has a key, Subhash key by my name. Let me choose a version. So all these things, all these security resources will be done by the security team, and this will be handed over to the server team for usage. So each team, when there is a complex application or a complex project, each team will perform their tasks and actions. Okay, so this is done. It says to associate a disk, I have to first grant permissions. Just click on that. It will automatically grant permission for you. Now, once this part is being done, let's go back to our web VM4, which is already being deallocated. Let me go to the disks. And now I can encrypt this disk. Encryption type. So what did we create? Double encryption. And here we can select a disk encryption set. Does it make sense? So all the hard work that we have done is actually for selecting a encryption set. Now if you see the association, reverse way. So this disk encryption set that we have selected is of type double encryption. It is available in the disk encryption set. Disk encryption set is associated with the key vault, and key vault has the required key within that. Is everyone clear with this? Are we able to relate the steps that we have discussed? Okay. Apply disk encryption set to a disk of deallocated VM. This is what we have done right now. Anyone, any questions here? So we have got 4 VMs created by now, 2 within the scale set and 2 individually. For scale set, I have used availability zone, and for the other 2 machines, I have used availability set. So I've shown you 2 options of high availability. Let me go back to all resources. This is my web scale set. Within web scale set. There is one instance right now. Why is there a one instance? Any reason for it? If you remember, we said minimum one instance. So the performance is, if the CPU consumption is below,
below what we expected. We did not put any pressure on it, so to scale it.
Yes, that's right. So if the number of requests that we don't have any requests, there's no pressure, like very rightly said. That's why it has removed that last machine. It has maintained one instance. So if you want minimum instance as 2, you have to mention that as part of your auto scale attributes or auto scale conditions. Shall we proceed further? So this is our, I don't have a public IP address over here assigned to it. That's why I will not be able to connect to that. Okay, so let me take a pause. Now, when you're looking at these resources, when you're looking at creating number of machines, when you're looking at creation of scale set, how many IPs are we talking about? When you say public IPs, how many public IPs are we looking at? So we are looking at one public IP per machine. Now, each of these public IPs will be associated with respective DNS, correct? Now, who's supposed to enter this DNS? Who's supposed to provide the DNS information and connect to these machines? Obviously, it has to be the end user, correct? So how many DNS names or how many public IPs will your end user remember? So tomorrow, if you have say 10 machines or 15 machines or 5 machines, the end user has to remember all that IPs. Does that happen in the real world?
No.
No. So what does the user remembers? User remembers one public IP. User remembers one DNS, and that DNS should automatically map to number of machines behind the scene, or whatever complex might be the environment. I would just need one DNS. So if you look at google.com, hotmail.com, portal.azure.com, any of these DNS, there is only one DNS. Now it may be connected to 20 machines behind the scene, 30 machines behind the scene. I don't have to worry as an end user. Are we getting it? So same thing holds true over here as well. And that's where you have the next section over here, which is load balancing. As far as load balancing is concerned, what this will help you do is, this will help you connect to number of machines behind the scene. Correct? So whether there are 2 machines, there are 5 machines, 10 machines. Right? So based on your number of machines that you need, you create all these machines within high availability environment. Now again, let me add one more point over here. This load balancing will always be coupled with high availability. Why is that? Even if I have say 4 machines on the same rack server or a same fault domain, if that fault domain goes down, all the load balancing thing that you have done will go for a toss, right? So you'll need to have the backend environment highly available, and then what you are giving to the end user is a load balanced environment, load balanced single IP. That will help, and that will give you the right solution. Getting it? Does it make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So let's look at the options available here. If you look at the options for load balancing, you have number of solutions over here. 4 of them which I can see in front of me, which is Azure Load Balancer, which is layer 4 load balancer. Then you have application gateway, which is layer 7 load balancer. Then you have Azure front door service, which is the third load balancer. And the fourth one that you have is Azure Traffic Manager. These are 4 load balancers which are available. Now, the second obvious question over here would be, in which scenarios we should use each of these load balancers? And the problem is I don't have an answer for it. To find out this answer, let's go to Azure Architecture. And within Architecture, you should be able to see answers for them. Can you see this? Choosing a right technology, choosing a compute service, and second is choosing a load balancing service. And here you should be able to see 4 load balancers: Azure front door service, traffic manager, application gateway, and Azure load balancer. These are 4 options available. So you'll see very clear category over here. Azure front door service and application gateway are primarily focusing on HTTP and HTTPS. So anything when you want to work with HTTP as a protocol, get into details of that, that's where we'll be using Azure front door service or application gateway. Whereas non-HTTPS, that is SMTP, FTP, I'm not saying it will not work for HTTP, but it is not targeted towards HTTP. So if you're looking at HTTP, HTTPS verbs like get, put, post, delete, any kind of HTTP headers, HTTP listeners, those kind of things you cannot configure on Traffic Manager or Azure Load Balancer, because this will work on a TCP. So it says anything, if I talk from a programming perspective, this is more from base class. Whereas front door service, these are more like derived class, specialized for a specific protocol. This is more generic in nature, generic protocols or a base protocols. If you scroll below, you'll also see a complete decision tree, which can help you decide in which scenarios or what kind of services, in which scenarios, which of these options can be used. Let me put this URL on the chat window so I can go through this. So it clearly mentions, depending upon the type of application you have, depending upon whether this is internal facing, internet facing, right? In which scenarios, what combinations that you can use over here. Okay, so I would recommend go through this. It will help you understand. Since I am falling short on time, so I want to make sure at least one load balancing implementation we can do right away. So if you look at Azure Load Balancer, this is layer 4 load balancer, and what you'll have to specify is your pool of virtual machines in terms of virtual machine scale set or in terms of availability set. So it can combine that features over here. Now, while you are configuring this load balancer, you have to mention the source IP, destination IP, which is the port you want to connect to, whether you want UDP as a protocol or TCP as a protocol, you can specify that. These will be your core attributes of load balancer. I don't have to discuss about this because I have already discussed it earlier, how you have layered approach or multiple tiers, and for each tier you should have one availability set. So web availability set, SQL availability set, and since you have put it into a availability set, these machines, they are already into different rack servers. Okay, so discussion on this we already have done. This diagram should help you understand how this allocation is being done physically, and logically what will be the significance of availability set. Does it make sense to everyone? Anyone, any questions here? So if you recall, this is what we have done right now. So for web environment, we have 2 machines in availability set. I have given the name as web AV set. Let me show you here. All resources. Web AV set. There are 2 machines over here. Let me start this machine. So within web AV set, we have 2 machines over here. Now, internal representation wise, if you see, first machine will be on 1 rack server, second machine will be on 2nd rack server. Same thing you can do for your SQL VMs as well. In terms of availability zone, 1 machine. So in case of virtual machine scale set, if it is creating multiple machines, so it will be scattered across 2 availability zones, and each availability zone will have different power supply, cooling, and internet connectivity. So that will help you to make sure we have a much better uptime for our resources. So we have already created the high availability solutions already there. Let me proceed further and look at the implementation of Azure Load Balancer. So if you look at your Azure Load Balancer, let's take a new resource group, or should I use existing resource group? Can you all tell me whose responsibility it is to create a load balancer? Server team, security team, network team? Network team, okay. So let's go to network RG. Within network RG, web load balancer, Southeast Asia. So depending upon your requirement, you can make use of an internal load balancer or external load balancer. So for SQL database, which kind of load balancer is required?
Internal.
Internal. Since we are using web application, we'll go for external or public load balancer. SKU, let it be standard, no problem. Public IP address, create a new one. We just have to mention the name for it. We just have to mention the name. So this is for internal reference. This will not be mapped to the user. So don't worry. Zone redundant. Let's go ahead. Click on create. This will be very, very fast. The reason being, it actually does not create anything. It just creates a external resource and maps to the front-end IP configuration. That's the only thing which is doing. We yet have to configure other resources over here. So load balancer front-end is already done. It has attached the public IP over here. Let's go to backend pool. Here, this is where we have to do our task. In the add section, let's give a load balancer web pool. Let's select our virtual network. Let's go ahead, add our machines over here. Okay, so in terms of backend pool configuration, we can add our machines over here. We can specify the machine IP address. Let me go to my virtual machines. And here if you see, it is not working on public IPs. It works on private IPs. 10.1.0.6. Next machine which I have is Web VM 04, which is 10.1.0.4. So I've added 3 machines over here. One is within the availability set, virtual machine scale set, and 2 are individual machines. So you can add it via network interface card, or you can specify your private IP addresses of those machines. Now, once you receive the request on the front-end IP configuration or front-end configuration, it will start mapping to resources behind the scene. So depending upon whichever machine is available. Okay. Now, how do I know which of these machines is running successfully and which of these machines have lesser load? How do you know that? Now, the easier way of finding that out will be by using a health probe. Okay, so let's go to a health probe over here. And what we can do is we can send a ping message. Generally, how we would find out whether the machine is working properly or not will be by sending a health probe, right? Or doing a ping. So you can do a HTTP ping, connect to the base URL. So if that response is quick, we would know that this machine is responsive. It has lesser number of tasks, and we can allocate another set of another request to that machine. That is what is referred as health probe. Now, next member over here is your load balancing rule. As part of your load balancing rule, this is where we can configure what is the front end port, what is the back end port. Now, many times what could happen is your front end port could be 80, the back end port could be 8080, 8080, or some other internal port. We would not want the user to know which is the internal port. As far as pool is concerned, we already have the pool. We already have the probe created. What is the session persistence that you would want? What is the meaning of session persistence? Now, when the first request is coming from a specific client, do you want the second request also to go to the same machine? The application which you created, is it stateful in nature or is it stateless in nature? So based on that, you can take this decision. Okay, getting it, everyone? That is what is referred as session persistence. So now who will help you answer this question? This question will be answered by the developers, whether they created a stateless application or stateful application. Most scenarios, once it comes to web application, they have to be stateless in nature. When it comes to microservice applications, they have to be stateless in nature, so that whenever the next request is coming from the user, it can connect to any machine behind the scene. It need not connect to only the it need not connect to the machine where the first request has been handled. It can connect to any machine behind the scene. Does it make sense to everyone? Let's go ahead. Click on add. Oops, sorry. Web LB rule. I did not mention the name for it. So I have my load balancer created. Behind the so what is facing the user will be a front-end IP configuration, a public IP. Behind it, I have a load balancer pool, which has 3 machines by now. Correct? I have associated that with a load balancing rule to check which machine is responding. I have a health probe for that. Now, one problem which I'm seeing over here. Why should the customer type an IP address? Customer should be specifying a DNS. Okay, so let me associate a DNS over here. So here, if you see, now this could be going to scale set, or this could be going to my existing virtual machines. I'm not sure about that because it is totally dependent on the load balancer. Let me go to the public IP once again. Web PIP, and if I'm not mistaken, this was the IP address associated with your load balancer. Let's go to configuration. Whatever DNS you want to mention over here. So if I go back to my load balancer, okay, so instead of mentioning 20.198, now what I should be doing is I should be mentioning the DNS over here. So using that DNS, I will be able to connect to my environment. Does this make sense to everyone? You all can try connecting to this. cf web app.southeastasia.cloudapp.azure.com. This can also be mapped to a custom domain. So in terms of resources, if you see, there are a number of resources which I have created. One is the network interface card, which will help me connect to the machines. Help me now. Okay, before I forget this, one more question here. Do I still need 3 public IPs, or I can work with a single public IP? If you look at the type of resources, right now I have 3 public IP, right? So do I need 3 public IPs, or do I need just 1 public IP? Chinna, what do you feel?
Just one.
Just one. And which one is that?
Oh, the first one.
The one which is associated with the load balancer.
Yeah.
That's right. So one which is associated with front-end load balancer. Only those resources you have, only that public IP is required. Other public IPs you can remove. So with network interface card, right now I have 2 public IPs. So I can go to IP config. I can disassociate. I can disassociate over here because I don't need 3 public IPs. See guys, you are still paying for those public IPs even if you are not connecting to it. So initially, when we were trying these things, it did make sense. But later, as you go ahead, you can disassociate or you can detach and remove those public IPs. So you'll have to be careful in terms of which resources you require, which resources you don't require. Resources that you don't require, you can get rid of it. Does it make sense to everyone? So now you need only one public IP, and that public IP will be the front-end IP configuration, because the load balancer communicates with these machines by using the private IP address. It doesn't require public IP. Clear, everyone? So only one public IP is sufficient. And once you, okay, another advantage that you see of removing these unwanted public IP addresses is it reduces the communication surface. So your machines are now behind the firewall. These machines are behind the firewall, behind the load balancer. So if you have to connect to these load balancers, the only way of doing that would be using the load balancer itself. Even if you have to do a RDP, even if you have to do an RDP into those machines, the only way of doing that would be by using the load balancer. Correct? So here, if I go to the load balancer, there is something called as network address translation. So using this network address translation, we'll be able to connect to our machines using the load balancer. I don't have to make these ports publicly available on the public IP. So only public IP will be the load balancer public IP, and I will be able to connect to it. Does it make sense to everyone? So go through the resources that we have created. Anywhere, any questions you all have? So in terms of load balancing options, we mentioned about 4 of them. First is Azure Load Balancer. Second, we mentioned about Application Gateway. Third, we mentioned about, what was the third one? Anybody remembers? Traffic Manager. And which is the fourth one?
Front door.
Front door service. So these are 4 load balancing options that we have. Out of these 4, we began with the first one, which is Azure Load Balancer, where we have components like front-end IP config, which associates with public IP. Second, we have behind the scene is backend pool, right, which associates with virtual machine scale set, which associates with your availability set, VMs, or even if they are not part of availability set, it's not an issue. You can connect to it, but that will not be a right solution. So if you want HA and LB together, then it should be within virtual machine scale set or availability set. Third thing that we have is verifying whether the machine is running correctly or not. That's where you have health probe, right? And fourth member, so as far as health probe is concerned, as the name suggests, verify responsiveness of VMs, whether they are responding, not responding. And the fourth step that we did over here was creation of load balancer rule. Right? So this is what we have done. So anyone, any questions here? I would recommend, we have done quite a few things in today's session. I would recommend once you all get up in the morning, first thing, just go through all the steps. And if you try replicating this in your environment, that would be your assignment. Okay. Go through all the steps that we have done, starting from the image creation to creating number of VMs using virtual machine scale set, independent machines. Don't forget to select the image when you are creating the VM. The mistake which I did, you all don't do the same mistake. When you are creating your VM, select high availability second after the image creation. Make sure you select the availability option. Make sure you select the image. And once you're done with that, take a load balancing option. Okay. So I'll stop with this for today.